I really should talk about animated series more often than I do, so let's just do that by going over my favorites of the year. Centaur World is a bizarre and fun genre mashup of wacky toon shenanigans, musicals, an Avatar-style war story, and the Lich from Adventure Time, I guess. I would have thought that the tone whiplash would have killed this, but aside from it just being effective as a distinct point of intrigue, like, this shouldn't work, I think it captures a great sense of not just the culture shock of a character going from a serious genre to a goofy one, and her desire to get back to her writer calls for a real feeling of being lost and confused and separated from loved ones. But then you've been away for so long that you're afraid that you've changed into a different person and they may not recognize you. Now here's Ted Mosby singing about how his farts are his dad. It really is just so wonderfully weird. And any musical gets a +5 for at least trying, and +20 if it does it well. Then season 2 aired, and I guess it's over now. It did wrap up all of its major story beats in a way that yelled, "Yep, we thought we were gonna get a season 3 too." Now, it was still a fun season, with a horrifying but very appropriate backstory for the bad guy, but boy did you take the wrong story elements from One Piece. I still think it's worth watching, especially if you prefer short series. Just very noticeable. This feels very abrupt. Another 2-season sprinter this year was Craig McCracken's new series, Kid Cosmic. Though it isn't finished yet, it does have a final season coming, and hopefully that's where it was always designed to end. On top of its fantastic comic book art style, Kid Cosmic has a interesting turn on the galactic superhero story, where we get the familiar intro of 5 random humans gaining superpowers from objects to intergalactic invaders, but it doesn't take very long for the story to assume that the audience already knows about how this would work on an episodic level, so we kind of montage past that bit and get to the greater implications of this concept. Like, exploring the alien cultures instead of them just being invaders? Does the military seriously not notice all of these alien attacks? And did you really think that an elementary school child with access to phenomenal cosmic power isn't going to abuse it and screw everyone over at some point? And by that I mean that Kid is actually a pretty excellently written kid character, displaying the innocence, idealism, but also the selfishness and self-aggrandizing of someone of that age group. Which, despite, yes, he should be flawed so that he can grow, did take him out of the running as my favorite character, which was obviously Joe, who very naturally slipped into a leadership position of 2 children, a cat, and a hippie grandpa, but then in season 2 gets a lot of expansion as she makes plenty of her own character-growing mistakes. I'm also glad that we quickly dispelled of this notion of we need to keep this a secret. Eventually, everybody knows, everyone pals around with the aliens, and since the powers come from easily removed objects, the powers can be exchanged and used by literally anybody beyond even the main 5. It's like they took the "but what about" questions of other superhero stories and used it to accelerate and evolve its story into something that feels mutually very modern and very classic. In other words, Craig McCracken continues to be really great at what he does. Now, to abruptly shift from the ending to the beginning of the year, I wanted to pay my respects to the Carmen Sandiego finale, which was way better than it had any right to be. Well, the series, not necessarily the finale, which was still decently functional. While each episode had some slight nods to its edutainment roots, in terms of teaching kids about countries and geography, the show itself was definitely not that. A lot of comparisons have been made to Kim Possible, though by definition, Carmen is a much more dynamic and evolving character. But more so, where that was clearly a parody, this is much more of a straightforward international espionage story. These were not your goofy, punny-named villains. These were seriously intimidating, violent, dangerous world conquerors. I love her Boston sidekicks. My one issue is that I really did miss the villain pun names. We did get Graham Crackle, one of the series' most dynamic and engaging characters, but that was it. And it was an impressive feat that managed to have a conclusion that did mostly feel very satisfying, but again caused me to wonder if we were being deprived of an initially planned final season of the more traditional villainous incarnation of the iconic character. Another premiere from the beginning of the year that got 2 seasons was The Great North, another entry from the Lauren Bouchard cinematic universe, I guess. Because damn it, if Seth MacFarlane can have 3 animated series, Bob's Burgers certainly can. Bob's Burgers is my comfort comedy show, and I have no problem with him spreading the love to another Goofy family comedy headed by the voice of Ron Swanson, this time set in Alaska. And Native Alaskans will have to tell me how much of this is egregious stereotyping or self-aware knowledgeable riffing. But of course that's not all from him, because we also got another season of Central Park on Apple TV, which would totally be worth a month's price by itself, even if Wolfwalkers and Ted Lasso weren't also on there. Every episode contains at least 3 song numbers that would likely be bangers, even without multiple voices from Hamilton. Of course you want to see Daveed Diggs play a rapping, disgruntled rich person's assistant trying to squirm her way into the will while constantly insulting her under her breath.
Your face is ruining my birthday.
Your birthday is ruining my face.
What's that?
I was just saying goodbye.
And I have already made a video for the 4th season of Infinity Train, which even if it is my least favorite season, still expands the lore of the train and thankfully didn't create a hasty ending, because give it a couple of years, it'll be nostalgic and you will get your shot to end it properly. I've also mentioned Shion Takeuchi's Inside Job, which sure is currently a slightly lower grade Futurama, but I did enjoy the concept of not just that every conspiracy is real, but the show's unique additional twist conspiracy under the existing conspiracies, and yet flat earthers are still the crazy ones. And I definitely got enough enjoyment out of season 1 to see where a potential future 2 is going. And it still has one of the best OPs of the year. And even if it wasn't a personal favorite just because I'm not too much of a superhero person, I can't deny how glad I was to see Invincible become a major cultural event this year. Which of course means it's gonna get a live-action movie. I don't have a whole lot to add to the general discourse without getting bogged down in the Amber debate. I'm personally just glad it's over before season 2, because this kind of dumb, convoluted romantic entanglement with secret identities is one of the major tropes that made superhero series very unlikable to me. But undeniably one of the best premiere episode hooks, and to me is one of the best ways to handle the R-rated superhero question. Though 80% of cries for that is just for people who want the same stories but with sex and gore, the genre through the years has proven that it has the narrative range to explore more mature subjects. But I also think it's better to use alternative universe stand-ins for those kinds of stories rather than more R-rated Batman or Superman, because then the character can be as different as the author wants without getting bogged down in the canon or out-of-character debates. And I also think this is one of the best uses of gore in a superhero show. Not every time, because sometimes it does feel very gratuitous, but this definitely felt like we needed to understand not just with the power, but how easy it is. And it was all the more impactful by using a similar style to the Justice League and WB animation shows. But hey, speaking of convoluted romance and superhero stories, the 4th season of Young Justice dropped out of nowhere, and splitting its season into 3 distinct stories. And I'll say right now, I don't believe it. And What If started with some really good and interesting standalone alternative universe stories, until it decided to blend it all together and make it a continuous narrative. Granted, it did give Black Widow another chance at life, hypothetically, but boy, that was disappointing. Now, Hitmonkey is an odd case. Hitmonkey was part of a substantial list of adult-oriented Marvel shows slated to premiere on Hulu, but because of everything 2020, maybe some other reasons, but either way, the bulk of them got axed. And the ones that survived, likely because they were already reasonably close to being finished. Though finished might be a word in quotations, because I don't know if this was always a factor of its budget or whether or not they suddenly turned it into a rush job at the end, but there are definitely some compositing issues and some rough animation that, probably could have used a couple more weeks in the oven at least. Now, the action scenes do still look pretty good, though. And we'll say that for the concept of a hitman monkey, the belief suspension is still pretty high. But it did still make for an exciting and surprisingly emotional series. And the actual Hitmonkey is a very compelling, tragic protagonist. I would recommend it, though with an asterisk. And that asterisk's name is Bryce, his human sidekick. Because, of course, you can't just have a silent protagonist. We need this guy over here to converse with him. And by that I mean just constantly quip at the audience on a level that would make Deadpool tell him to take a breath. Not that his presence is completely irredeemable. At the start, knockoff Wade Wilson Ted Lasso was kind of working for me. Just over time, he just starts weighing on you. And more I started being reminded of 4Kids productions, where, you know, you're mandated to fill in every potential moment of emotional silence with pointless filler non-humor. They needed to take his total word count and, like, cut it back by at least a third. It's not a must-watch, but it is enough to make me sorry that we didn't get the rest of the series and their inevitable crossover. And I am so glad that Adult Swim rescued Tuca and Birdie from cancellation. I grow to love these two the more I watch them. They're a great female friendship, it's a great comedy, and a really great use of animation. Amphibia is one of the most hyped shows of this year, which is probably actually in my top 5. I just can't think of a whole lot of ways to say that I just really like it. The season 2 finale was unexpected. And then season 3 having to de-isekai itself and go back to the human world has been an amazing great change of pace, because Anne's parents are amazing. But in general, the story direction of Amphibia, I honestly haven't been that interested in. I mean, sure, it's building up to some dimensional war. What series made these days isn't? I'm honestly not as into the action as much as I was interested in just exploring an amphibian fantasy world, watching the comedy be hilarious, and just watching these characters be adorable with each other. This has just been a very pleasant, fun series to watch. I'm just so proud of all of my Gravity Falls offspring. You've all done so well for yourselves. And the Ghost in Molly McGee has been a lot of fun too. Sure, Molly embodies literally the exact kind of Pinkie Pie character that I usually have a really hard time liking, but because she does have her moments of self-reflection, she does make for a very funny protagonist who is a great contrast for Scratch, who of course is a constant mood. Similarly, Maya and the Three is another one I would consider to be in my top 5 of the year. A classic prophesized epic battle miniseries where I feel like we get the closest to the drama and effed upness that usually exists in most deity pantheons. Just as much as we can get away with in a young targeted miniseries. They do talk about sacrificing babies. But my biggest respects comes from its ability to acknowledge and feature death. My only mild tick about it was that this is another story that puts a big emphasis on the power of friendship, which, you know, most epics are. But in this case, I did feel like I was being told how close this group was and how much they loved each other rather than really seeing it. I still absolutely love them, and boy did Stephanie have a great year. But oh my deities, did I mention that the artwork in this is incredible? The decoration and the detail. And then I love the themes of family, including found family and adoptive family. There's a lot of sentiments along the lines of this is what Korra should have been, and I do get where that comes from, though I do think that the two have more overlap than some people think, just that Maya doesn't dash off at the starting line with such stacked stats, which again is one of the dumbest reasons to not like Korra. And she has that dash of tragedy that makes her mission a bit more sympathetic. Though it is definitely a more comprehensible and cleaner story, which happens when you manage length. But then a great hidden gem that far less people have talked about is Tear Along the Dotted Line, an Italian miniseries written and directed by this guy, featuring the socially awkward young adult Zero and his armadillo conscience as he snarkily riffs and complains about the kind of things that young adults tend to complain about. From what are you gonna do with your life, to the junk on my table and my couch is threatening to take over my apartment. And yes, I do need to get to the airport 3 hours early because otherwise everything in the power of the gods will rain down to cause me to miss it. But what did initially seem like an array of barely connectable random ramblings starts to come together as he admits that all of these ramblings are a way of distracting himself while on his way to do something incredibly serious. The cartoonish visuals and fast-talking comedic energy go really well together, but still able to be highly effective when the tone gets much more somber. But of course, there's undoubtedly numerous shows that I either haven't heard of or just didn't get to. So let me know, Animaniacs, what were your favorites of the year? And have a bearable new year. I think we need to lower our standards for the sake of our sanity.